Ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, Oliver. How are you?
I'm very well, Mark. Very well. Good to see you.
Yes, you too. Well, apologies for the brief technical hiatus, but we're here and we are in the same, well, I don't know what you'd call it, digital world. We're digitally connected in some way, shape, or form, tethered between Liverpool and London. I assume you're in London. Tethered between.
No, I'm in Kent.
London.
I'm on the south coast near Dover.
Ooh, very nice part of the world. Okay, so just firstly to say, both the team are really excited to have you back in Merseyside. We were fortunate enough to catch Oliver and the rest of the School of Night in the very lovely Shakespeare North Gardens last summer. So we're extremely excited to be able to bring you indoors with lanterns, which you may or may not use, depending how accurate you wish to be. But we're just delighted that we can celebrate in 20 years of the School of Night. An amazing piece of work. Everybody who I've secretly told about it beforehand was going, "Oh my God!" So there are lots of people in Liverpool are very excited to see you. So just to start off with, so across the past year, so we include 24, so 25. What has inspired you? What have you seen? What have you heard? What have you listened to? What's really kind of made you kind of go, "Wow, that was amazing"?
Okay. A few things spring to mind. On stage, the thing that's really inspired me was a revival of Sophie Treadwell's Makin, an amazing play from the 20s, which came to the Old Vic from Bath, opened in Bath, directed by the great Richard Jones, who's one of our great living directors, I think. But he's a great lover of expressionism. So it was all done in a kind of yellow box with black costumes and about maybe 8 or 10 lamps, very simply lit, long shadows, but brilliantly performed, incredibly intense. It's like a Greek tragedy, really. For those who don't know, it's about a woman who is trapped in a kind of loveless marriage and eventually kills her husband, but based on a real story. That blew me away. That was one of those things when you're like, this is what all theatre should be. So that would be one of my points. And also via the Dylan pick, not to say the Dylan pick was fine, but actually I kind of come back to Dylan. That made me kind of dig into like the Scorsese documentary and the old albums and really appreciate what an extraordinary, towering figure of poetry and creativity and what inspiration he is. I think those two would be my immediate responses for what's inspired me to try to do better.
I was fortunate enough to see Makin when I was a student I think it was probably 91.
The National
with Fiona Shaw.
Yes,
which was phenomenal, and I absolutely got turned on to that play because I was just like, this is just what a tremendous piece of work. How you describe it, very different in tone, but Fiona Shaw's the scene where she shaves her head or is shaved, head shaved, there's just, and then they had this great singer who was just singing in the sort of what felt like the loft space, just singing this lament in this sort of jazzy kind of bluesy style, was just that's just stuck. And I still have the program. I was digging through a box of memories. I keep everything. And every so often I'm instructed to get rid of stuff. I'm a great hoarder. And I was like, oh no, keep. Ooh, I remember seeing this. So that's wow. I hadn't seen. I know it's not an often performed play, but it's one of those.
I think that's its first revival since there was one on Broadway, but I think that's the first UK production since the one you saw.
Wow. But I hadn't realised it was sort of it had been revived, because it would have been certainly something that perhaps Bath's a bit too far to travel, but it certainly would have been on my radar if I'd have kind of gone, oh maybe. Yeah, and the Dylan pick, I haven't watched it. Big fan, but there's constant poetry that sort of runs through everything that he does, in terms of the tuning of the guitar to the actual lyrics themselves, to his attitude to life and things like that. There's an amazing.
More than sort of necessarily the film. The film just brought me back to him, And the Scorsese documentary, which is called No Direction Home, for those who don't know, which is about 5 hours in total, covers very much the same period of his life, first half of the 60s, but it's cut together with incredible footage of him doing that electric tour in the UK with these incredibly kind of shirt and tie, buttoned up kind of English young folk going to see it, and seeing how betrayed they feel, how intense that decision was for him to go electric, and yet he had to blow it all up because he felt so trapped.
Yeah.
So that was a really inspiring thing.
There's an amazing piece of footage. I studied popular music as a module when I was at uni and in Liverpool, and
Right.
there was the lecturer showed us this footage of Dylan on the balcony of the Adelphi Hotel in Liverpool,
Wow.
with just all these fans, just inside and outside
Yeah.
of the Adelphi, and it was just phenomenal. And like you said, very kind of very suited and very
Yeah.
different. It's just like yeah, no, great. Well, they're two fantastic memories which always provoke something in my head already. So it's obviously 20-year anniversary. How did you guys get together? How did Ken pull you in to kind of go, do you fancy doing this? Where did it first start? What was its sort of evolution? I'm bundling loads of stuff in here because I'm sure
Okay.
it evolved slowly over time, as these things do.
Yeah.
Starting off, how did Ken pull you guys together?
So I personally had already worked with Ken in the late 90s in a play called The Warp, which was a 24-hour long play cycle, which in fact finished its previous life in Liverpool, the beginning of the 80s, when Ken was running the Everyman, having gone around. It was a 24-hour play cycle, but he did it as a 10-week soap. So I then came back into that, as indeed did Alan Cox at separate times, and that was so I knew Ken already. But then he rediscovered Impro, kind of in the last few years of his life, because he'd been involved much earlier on at the Royal Court with Keith Johnson and people there, and when they were still doing comedy at the Royal Court, which seems to have kind of got lost now. But he was sort of brought back to it by coming up to Liverpool, and he did a workshop at the Everyman called Farting About in Disguises in about 2005, just before we did this thing, just before we started, and got a scratch team up there, including Paul Robinson and I think Keddy Sutton and a few others. And he'd been asked to do Shakespeare's birthday at the Globe, the Shakespeare's birthday celebrations, which they do every year. So he had a team he had the Suggestibles from Newcastle, who of course have been around for ages. He had this team out of his workshop in Liverpool, and then he put together a scratch team down in London. And suddenly rediscovered Impro in these last few years of his life, when, as he put it himself, what I'm really into now is inspiring the young people to have fun. And that was kind of what he was into. So we did a theatre sports night, a Shakespeare-themed theatre sports night at Shakespeare's Globe, Shakespeare's birthday 2005, and that was where the School of Night was born. So me and Dylan, who you'll see in Liverpool, but also Adam Megiddo, Sean McCann, and Josh Darcy were all involved in that night, as well as other people as well, including Keddy. And from that, in 2006, we went to Edinburgh with a show called In Pursuit of Cardenio, because Cardenio was a play written by Shakespeare and Fletcher. It existed because the story comes from Don Quixote, and the first translation of Don Quixote had been published in English in 1612-ish, something like that. And so you read it and you go, of course this was a Shakespeare play. There's an evil brother and a good brother. There's a wedding. There's a woman who dresses as a shepherd and goes mad in the countryside. There's everything you could want of a Shakespeare play already there in this thing. So we recreated it through Impro, using John Michel's book, Who Wrote Shakespeare. We would attempt different writers' theories every night. We do, Bacon one night, and we do Rawley another night, and this, that, the other. And Ken decided that the School of Night, which was one of the theories of authorship, I think in John Michel's book, it's number 3 or number 4 in terms of likelihood, was the best one we liked. So for those who don't know, the School of Night was a real group gathered around Dr. John Dee, the Earl of Northumberland, Walter Raleigh, Rawley, and various other people. And the theory goes that in the corner was this son of a glove maker from Stratford called William Shakespeare, who wrote everything down, right? Now, it doesn't quite hold up because Raleigh died well before Shakespeare was writing, but it's one of the theories. So that was why we became known from then as the School of Night. Under Ken's tyranny in the last 2 years of his life, we were kind of his performing monkeys. He would basically ask us, as he used to put it, ask us to do the impossible and shout at us when we got it wrong. So we would do that, all kinds of stuff though. There was Shakespeare in there, but there was also just capers, just procedures, as we call them, bent to kind of, so now be a vampire at the Wailing Wall who's speaking in tongues or whatever it might be. Okay. And some of them were Johnstonian and Orangian, and some of them were straight out of Ken's brain. So we did that for a couple of years, and then in August 2008, Ken died. So we've been doing it for 2 or 3 years, and we thought, well, that's it. We can't do it, that, Ken. We thought, well, we'd like to, though. This stuff is fun, so how could we carry it on? So we thought, who could replace Ken? Which sounds like a ridiculous thing to say now, but we brought in Alan Cox at that point because we thought, Alan loves all this stuff. Alan was in the Warp as well. He knows Ken's world. But of course, two things were: one, that Alan was the same age as us. He was the same generation as us. And B, he wasn't Ken. He didn't have that streak which didn't care less what people thought of him. Ken didn't mind with us if the audience hated him, because they'd love us all the more if they hated him, right? But Alan was one of us. So we started to co-goad each other. We refer to it as goading each other, to push each other on. And if something went wrong, to kind of punish people, this kind of thing. We would goad each other. So that grew from 2008 with Alan. And we did some amazing gigs. I remember doing Latitude Festival in a raging kind of rainstorm, and several festivals in Edinburgh. And we went on the Verb with Ian McMillan and all kinds of stuff. And right through then until about 2015, we were kind of busy sort of all over the place. 2015, 2017. So that's a shortish answer to how it started. Sorry, it's not shorter than that.
No. That's fascinating. I could listen to you. I could listen to you speak all night. Yeah, it was Farting Around in Disguises, which had a huge impact in the Liverpool improv scene here, because it was an open audition. People went down, and Ken pulled together about 40 or so performers who he taught sort of short form stuff, and then did 3 or 4 nights at the Everyman.
Liam was another one.
Yes,
Liam was another
Ian
one.
and Trev and Angie, I think. So it really, impropriety sort of emerged out of that. I'm sure they would correct me, but yeah, that was that kind of group that was around, and then they drove that on. The Warp was, I came to Liverpool in 92? Yeah, 92, and people were still do. A couple of colleagues just went, it's the Warp that they saw at the Everyman is the greatest piece of work that they've ever seen, and it's just like constant reference point for them. And there's a load of great YouTube footage for those who don't know what we're talking about, but he went up to Edinburgh, and there's a cinema, and there's a load of great footage there, and obviously discovered Bill Drummond walking through Matthew Street, the mathematical center of the universe. So yeah, there's there were lots of people, great people, kind of emerged from that, and also were massively influenced by Ken and his theory. I remember him talking about having 2 sides, and he naming
an anti-adromism.
Yes.
He was very into that.
Yeah, it was kind of going, and I was kind of listening. I was kind of going, yeah, kind of don't really understand, but
well, maybe we should demonstrate that for you. It's one of that we still keep it in as a procedure sometimes.
Oh,
if a scene arises in an improvised play, an improvised Shakespeare, which is suited to an anti-adromism, then we still apply that sometimes.
Right. Oh, okay. No, I was kind of like, I was very young, fresh-faced, and kind of going, whatever. But I was also just highly amused by Ken demonstrating just that. And he seemed to be obsessed at the time with Texan cattle Sellers kind of, and then he would just get us to improvise
Oh, okay.
that, which I was just like kind of going, it sounds amazing, but you know, I'm not really sure
He,
what the
he was a man of serial enthusiasms. Like I remember
yeah
a period when he was really into Irish diddling, you know, that kind of scat type of singing, which is like a
yeah
Gaelic thing, which Keddy is brilliant at. But he didn't understand that everyone couldn't do that.
yeah.
You know, yeah.
No, I was sort of just kind of going, wow, this man, I don't know what it is, but there's something very special and magical about you, where you just sort of seem to be like the greatest light bulb in the room. And I was very fortunate. Ken Cup came to watch a show that we did called Hoof, and it wasn't too far from where he lived in
No, no,
Redbridge.
Hoof was an inspiration to us too. Hoof was an incredible.
So we kind of, he came a couple of times, and he was Mark, you know, that sort of very nasally tone, which I loved, and I can't recreate, and I won't. But yeah, it was very pleasing to see the sort of, in terms of kind of Ken then kind of, you know, because Keddy was involved, so you know, him being very supportive, and very complimentary in lots of ways. And so his sort of legacy continues, which is fabulous. But in terms of the School of Night, because I really liked the game playing within the structure. Did that come at a later point, or was that something that Ken kind of introduced? In terms of like kind
Uh,
of going, oh, there's almost like a, this is the this is, we're going to embed and right. I can't remember who it was, but the emotional anger through the humors of kind of going, oh, we're going to play this now, and really change the telling of, or the performance of the
yeah, there are a number of procedures in the evenings which I suppose to a certain extent we might be looking out to do them, but we don't make a list of what's going to be in a show.
mm,
It depends where that story goes,
yeah yeah
whether humors is suitable or an antidromism is suitable, or I mean any number of other things. You know, playing the faces is another one, um, which we might have done on the show you did. We might not. Um, so Ken loved to play games, and certainly I think one of the reasons that he came back to Impro was because he was easily bored, and he hated to do a show the same way twice. You
yeah
know, I mean, when we first went to Edinburgh in 2006, the idea was to do this show, and we kind of, after a couple of nights, we created these incredible scenes. But then Ken was like, yeah, I've done that now. Let's do something else completely different. You know, so almost the mechanism of Impro came out of that as well, and the fact that he was very easily bored. Um, so the games are there, but I think also, you know, we might come back to this a lot. The most valuable thing in Impro, as I'm sure you know, and what was absolutely chemical about Poof, I think, is that it's the group, right? It's the
yeah
group dynamic. It's not about how clever one improviser is. It's
yeah
not about your format. To hell with format. It's about how well does the group work together, and you can't replace that. You know, like in a good rock group or in any group, good ensemble. That's what it's about. So the games are now sort of embedded in the structure, so they might be pulled out at any point. It might not be in the Shakespeare, because we don't just do Shakespeare. It might be pulled out in a Chaucer procedure or a fairy tale procedure or whatever
yeah
it might be, right? To say, oh yeah, now we can apply that structure to that thing.
yeah
But that's only done with time.
yeah. No, it's reps and learning the micro gestures of your scene partners, which make most people kind of, oh, it's like magic, and you kind of go, no, we've just become really good at watching each other, and
Yeah,
almost you can see when someone's little twitch is going, you kind of go, I know that you're going to go, or I know, you know, and it almost becomes unconscious then.
yeah.
Um, so yeah,
And
it
also
takes
watching people and going, hey, do you need help?
yeah
Or on the other hand, is this too easy for you and do I need to make it harder?
yeah
Those things
yeah
as
yeah.
well.
Well, that's when you can start to play with people, and kind of going, oh, okay, so we're you know, like you say, we're going to challenge you now, or we're going to support you, but we know we're teaching on the edge of being very naughty,
Yeah,
and wanting, you know, I was always a big giggler, and so people's eyes, they tried to catch my eyes, and the more I attempted not to laugh, then the more that people would do it, and I'd be literally biting my tongue, Yeah, and you know, every director I ever worked with kind of go, oh, stop corpsing, and I'm kind of going, no, corpsing is a beautiful thing. Why would you want to curtail that? Someone
Yeah,
losing control. So, you know, hey ho, it is what it is. But yeah, there's not many plays where they in the stage direction he corpses or they
of course.
corpse,
That's
unless
great.
you know they are a corpse.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, lots of fun. But that only, like you say, takes a lot of time to develop and a shorthand with folk.
It's an interesting thing is, when you're teaching also to try and get people in terms of what happens, right?
Yeah,
There's a lovely quote from David Escobedo's feed today about Improv Boost about it was from Keith Jarrett. Miles Davis asking Keith Jarrett, how do you do all that improvised stuff? And Keith like saying, I don't know really, it just comes, and saying, can we find a way of not making I don't know a negative statement? That's a positive. I go along with a teacher, but it's a lot. I don't know. Johnston embraces this, is absolutely a positive statement, you know? So that when someone corpses in a scene, that's in the scene. It should always be in the scene. It should never be something that's taken. How can you shouldn't be able to take yourself out of an improv scene because the improv scene is going to go wherever it goes. So
yeah,
if you're laughing, but you're laughing within the context of what just happened, you know? And that's beautiful when everything can just be folded back into the loaf.
yeah. No, I think uh the what I was in relation to was often when we were devising stuff, and I would corpse at something, or they would play with me, you know, and then they kind of going, oh, let's, because there's a brilliant scene. We did a show with Kelly called The Games, and she's got a set of polystyrene horse teeth like this, and every time it would make me howl with laughter, and in the end, you know, we kept it in because and it wasn't forced, it was a genuine, I just thought it is one of the funniest thing. She
Yeah.
flicks her hair back like this, makes kind of noise with these plastic teeth that she's very delicately drawn a tooth gap for this horse, and every single time it just made me howl with laughter. And so
Yeah.
in the end they just kept it in because the audience just were seeing the same thing that I was, and it was
Yeah.
kind of recognizing. I'm saying to the, almost recognizing to the audience, this is really funny, and you know, and
Yeah,
allowing.
but what's great about that is it's not funny because you're trying to be funny.
No,
It's funny because you're out of control.
yeah, yeah,
That's what's fun.
yeah, and that was every single time. I think we did that show 60 odd times around the UK, and every single time it got me in some way, you know, because one, you know, her teeth would sort of fall funny, or she put it in sort of, it was slightly too small. So every day we had to find a polystyrene cup for, and she'd delicately make this set of, and it was just, oh, joyous
Brilliant.
to watch
Brilliant.
and experience. Um, in regards to future plans, so I know you've got plans potentially for the rest of the 20th anniversary. Is there anything you can share with us, or is it all under wraps, waiting to be?
No, not particularly. So before we come to you, we're playing in Leeds at Slunglows outdoor venue, and then at the Theatre Royal in Richmond, Yorkshire, which we're very excited about. Second oldest theatre in the country. Because we've got to the point now where we'd like to seek out unusual places to go. That's why we wanted to go to Shakespeare North. It's why we will be back at the wonderful Willow Globe in central Wales in July. I think it's our 5th year there. For those who don't know, an incredible venue in central Wales, which is made of living willow. It's planted in this very wet field, but the owners wanted to have a small theatre there. So it's about a quarter of the size, I suppose, of the Globe itself. Seats about 150 people, but it's made out of living trees. It's incredible, beautiful, beautiful setting. So we'll be there in July, and also we'll be doing our first London dates in quite a while at an amazing venue called Sands Studios in Rotherhithe, which is run by, well, not run by, but sort of overseen by the amazing Christine Edzard, costume designer and film director, and her partner Michael. And so we'll be doing some gigs there as well. Yeah. So
Oh, amazing.
what's happening so
I've
far.
seen the pictures of the Willow Globe on obviously on your website, and it does look stunning.
So amazing. So amazing.
So people are crafting all of this thing. It does. I bet when the wind goes through there, it must just sound magical.
Yeah, it's okay. It's pretty sheltered actually, because it's in a bit of a valley. As long as it doesn't rain. The last time we were there, for the first time ever, there was wet rain, but they've got an amazing barn. So if you're not in the Willow Globe, you can go. They've got a tent and they've got a barn. It's just an extraordinary place with quite a large catchment area, because there are no other theatres near them, and they're probably the only venue in Wales who are sort of dedicated to mostly Shakespearean work.
Right.
There's a bit of storytelling, a bit of other stuff, but mostly Shakespeare themed work.
Oh, fab. Where did you say it was in Wales?
Well, yes, what's it near? It's near, oh crikey, it's smack in the middle of the country, and I should remember what the towns are, but just go to the Willow Globe, Shakespeare
Yeah.
link. You will find it.
Fab. And have you any plans to make anything new together, or reprise something that you'd obviously mentioned earlier?
Well, I think the thing is that the show has had many manifestations. There is a core, I suppose, of stuff we do a lot, but like Alan and I with Rob Mountford, who won't be doing this show, or Mandrake as he's known, did a show at. We also do regular shows at the Shakespeare Institute in Stratford, and there was one night we thought, well, let's just not make any plans at all and just see what happens and be as free as possible. And that was a really exciting show. There was another time when we did 2 shows with no Shakespeare at all, which were to do with Beckett, when there was a production of All That Fall, the Beckett radio play being done by Michael Gambon and Eileen Atkins in London. And we did 2 shows, that was me, Joseph and Josh Darcy, all themed around Beckett. So we looked at Beckett and we said, well, his influences were Shakespeare wasn't important to Beckett, but Dante was. So we did a Dante theme, and Terza Rima is fiendishly difficult. We did some J.M. Singh stuff, and we did a 3-part Ulysses procedure, which we invented for that gig. So it's to do with the challenges that are there. 2 years ago, for the 400th anniversary of the Shakespeare Folio, we did a wonderful gig at the Central Birmingham Library, the biggest collection of Shakespeare ephemera in the world, extraordinary collection which belongs to the city of Birmingham, and just worked around the building and worked off the books we'd been given freely from this incredible collection, not the actual folio, that was in a box in the corner,
Yeah.
The only folio that belongs to a city rather than to an individual. So it's more a question of what's bespoke for that gig. Do you know what I mean? The time and place and setting of that gig.
Yeah.
And so hopefully, in coming to Liverpool, that will be just as appropriate. So there's nothing we're not planning anything now that's going to be complete change from what we've done, because the reason it's called the School of Night is we've always seen it more as a process than a show.
Yeah.
So hopefully it goes on developing all the time.
Yeah. Oh, so it's more of an umbrella to allow you to do lots of different things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So you're bringing your workshop to us, which is don't just do something, stand there. What might the participant, or what might be the reason that an improviser might want to come sign up, come take that class with you?
I've been thinking a lot recently about the tyranny of format. And it was Sean McCann, actually, who gave me the wonderful quote, which is, asking what format your show is in is like asking what font your novel is printed in.
Yeah.
Let's try and break away from all that. For training purposes and teaching purposes, Harolds and Armandos and all that stuff is fine. But what happens if we try and move away from all that and say, let's just see where something goes? And a lot of that is driven by our desire to talk rather than respond to each other in other ways. Physical clown and just close observation, and putting ourselves in situations where we either can't talk or have no necessity to talk. Then where does that take us, and how do we respond? Because a lot of impro, because of our traditions in this country, is still driven by verbal pyrotechnics and speech. So I want to try and experiment with what happens when we move away from that.
Interesting. So yeah, no, I completely get that. The one of the things around the idea of micro gesture and really watching how somebody moves, I think, is a really, because we're constantly giving off offers all the time. We just don't see them, or don't respond to them. We have to wait. We always wait for the verbal, which feels like a safety blanket, but actually it becomes an intellectual pursuit of very often how clever can I appear, or how can I be the most dominant one in the room, which is always, sadly,
never try and do that.
but
There's a wonderful
sorry.
quote from the great Dana Anderson, who is one of, we were very influenced by the Albertans,
Yeah.
the Edmonton, Alberta crowd, incredible improvisers. As you know, people may know, the Canadians are the greatest improvisers in the world because they all do it from the cradle. So, you know, when we started learning from them, when they were already 10, 15 years younger than us, they were geniuses, and we were scratchy beginners, you know. But Dana Anderson, you always used to say that the scene is in the other person. And if you can do that, if you can really take it completely out of yourself, which is a life's work, I'm not saying that's easy, but if you can follow that, the scene is in the other person, make them look good, then it's a good beginning.
No, I remember because I think they came over, didn't they, for the Improvathon, which Impropriety organised up in Liverpool for a good number of years. And
yes, absolutely. Dana called one. I did one at the Casimir, set on board a cruise ship, I think, whenever that was, 15 years ago or something. And Dana directed that.
Well, thank you so much. You can catch Oliver and 20 Years of the School of Night on Saturday, the 26th of April at 8 p.m. in Unity Theatre. Tickets are still on sale, so please book. I promise you, this is something that you do not want to miss. If you're in Liverpool or the region, or indeed the north, come to Liverpool simply to just come and see these guys, because I promise you, it's top notch. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mark.